Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's a rainy Hawaiian day and I'm here to talk about one of my favorite topics, Japanese translated fiction. But before I do that, I wanted to talk about how I became obsessed with Japan. It happened at the World's Fair 1963 in New York City, where I'm from. And there was a Parker's Pen Pavilion. Those were the pens, and they had Get a Pen Pal. You go through a line and you write down what your favorite hobbies are, and at the end they give you a name. And the name I got was Hiroko Oda, and she was from a small village in Japan. And we became pen pals, and that was a thing, actually writing letters, telling each other about the places where we're from and what our hobbies were. And I learned so much from Hiroko about Japan, and it really was the impetus of why I wanted to travel, period, but eventually Japan. But how I got to Japan was it was an accident. My daughter got a degree in Japanese studies, and she lived in Japan for 7 years. And she said, "Mom, if you want to visit me, I'm going to go home soon." And I went there with also a degree in intercultural communication and teaching English as a foreign language. I wasn't planning to go to Japan, but it worked out that way, and I was offered a job because as an older woman, for the first time in my life, I was wanted for being an older woman, because most of the teachers there were young men, and they wanted someone to teach kindergarten as well as other levels. And I stayed there 3 years, had a wonderful experience, and I think because of my pen pal relationship, and not to mention my interests in other cultures, I got along very well. I was able to adapt to the culture. I learned some Japanese even before I came, which the people were astounded by, even though I really didn't learn much more than that. Being an English teacher in Japan, they want you to speak English. But I had a wonderful experience. But I did not know about Japanese translated fiction until I joined Booktube 5 years ago. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I found so many books that I'm going to talk to you about that are my favorites, and some that I think might be your favorites. So let's get started without further ado. Now, I'm going to start with some books that aren't my favorite, but that I learned about on Booktube by being a booktuber. And I'll have the first one here. It's one of my favorite books, not my favorite genre, but somehow it worked for me in Japanese translated fiction. And I'll have the cover here. It's called Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, translated by Eric Ozawa. And I heard about it all over Booktube a few years ago. And what was really funny is, when I first got to Japan, my daughter lived around the corner from a konbini. What are they called? Konbini. I called it konbini, but it looked just like, if you're from America, a 7-Eleven. It was so much like a 7-Eleven that I expected everything to be there, except everything was in kanji, so I didn't know what I was picking up. But what I did pick up was the workers who worked there were pretty shy, didn't speak English, and when you asked them a question, a lot of them were very, they didn't know what to say. They didn't know, it was like I was embarrassing them, especially with my kind of big personality. So when I read Convenience Store Woman, it brought back so many memories of how I had to say, I don't like bean paste. because a lot of things have that red bean paste and I don't like it. And I said, nai, nai, and they would laugh. And so it brought back a lot of memories. So what is this book about? Convenience Store Woman is about Keiko Furukura, and she's 36 years old, and she's been working part-time as a convenience store woman for the last 18 years. And she has known since childhood that she is different. Now, different, I thought maybe she was on the spectrum, but it's never really explained 100%. And expressing her own views and actions is inexplicable. She really can't explain why. And it's expressing to others that she doesn't want to get married, she doesn't want a better job, she's happy working in the convenience store. And so one of the reasons that she loves the convenience store is that she doesn't have to think about things on her own. Everything has a manual, a corporate manual, and it allows her, so she learns exactly how things are, what the management wants from her. And she reads the manual, and she doesn't have to think about anything else. And in this book, I really enjoyed reading about her. And also, I found out later on that the author herself worked in a convenience store for about 18 months. So she really knew what was going on. And in the book, we see she makes some decisions, Keiko does, to make herself more acceptable to her family, because her family is really on her case about what is she going to do with her life, etc., etc. I really enjoyed this book. This is a debut novel, and I highly recommend it. It's a coming-of-age novel. It's a feel-good novel. Not that I don't like any of those things, but because it was in Japan, I think if it was in another setting, I might not have been that keen on it. So that's my first book. It's not my favorite book, but I really enjoyed it. The second book is also a genre that I wouldn't have been that interested in. I wanted to go through the genres that aren't my favorite first, because I was pleasantly surprised. And that book will be here also. It's Days at the Morisaki Bookshop. In Japanese, it's Morisaki Shoten no Hibi. I just like to keep up my Japanese. This is written by the Japanese writer Satoshi Yagisawa. Now, it's funny because in Japanese, Satoshi is what you would know already, it's a male. But knowing Spanish, it's the opposite. So when I said my pen pal Hiroko, I would think in Spanish that would be a male, oh. But in Japanese, it's a woman. So I made the mistake when I was teaching. I would call somebody Yuki, thinking, Yuko, and it was a guy, Yuki. But anyway, it was just something that made me laugh when I was there. But so this is first published in Japan in 2010, and it follows a young woman who rebuilds her life while living and working in her uncle's secondhand bookshop in Tokyo's Kanda Jinbocho district, where all the used bookstores, I think, still are. Now, what made me really like this book, because it isn't a book that I would normally like, but I knew someone when I was working and I want to be kind of vague about this, but I was working as a social worker, and I met a lot of Japanese students, and I actually met someone who had this particular situation. So that made me very interested in it. So we're following Takako. She's a 25-year-old office worker, and she's devastated when her boyfriend announces he is marrying someone else. But what was alike the person that I met was that the person that he's going to marry works in the same place that Takako works in. So you can imagine in Japan would be even more uncomfortable and embarrassing than it would be in the United States. It would put somebody in depression, which it did to the person that I knew. And she actually came all the way from Japan to Hawaii to get away from that situation. So I was quite interested in this. So after she quits her job, which my friend did, and she retreats to her apartment until her bachelor uncle Satoru, invites her to move into the cramped second floor of the Morisaki Bookshop, his bookstore in Jimbocho. So surrounded by musty stacks and eccentric regulars, Takako slowly rediscovers pleasure in reading and begins to heal. And there's also a second story with the uncle and his wife who had left him. And we're following that too, but not as closely as we're following Takako's story. And it's a very feel-good story. And of course it's in a bookstore, so how could I resist? I really enjoyed this book. Also not my favorite. Now we're getting to my favorites. And when I went to Canada, I was very lucky enough to go to Granville Island off Vancouver, where you go in a little ferry boat. And I went to a wonderful bookstore. I'm not sure if it was the Crow's Nest or something like that, but I asked the wonderful staff there to recommend a Japanese translated book. And this had just come out. It's Point Zero. And it's by one of my favorite Japanese authors. His name is Seicho Matsumoto. He's a master crime writer, and he was very famous in Japan for his crime writing. And believe it or not, as much as I love this book, it wasn't my favorite book of his. And I'll get to that. But it is on my shelf. It's beautiful, and I really loved it. So let me just give you a little bit about Seicho Matsumoto. He's born in 1909 and he died in 1992. He's known as the Agatha Christie of Japan. And he wrote many, many books. I'm only going to talk about a few. You'll be happy to know. But this one was, in 2016, was translated by Louise Kawai. And by Bitter Lemon Press in 2024, actually. It was first published in the United Kingdom. And it was first published in Japanese as Zero no Shoten by Kobunsha Company, 1959. And that's part of why I love this book. It really shows the post-war Japan in a way that the first time I went to Japan was in 1990. So on my way to the Philippines. So I really noticed the difference when I went back. So I can imagine what it was like. So this is the premise. Tokyo, 1958. Teiko marries Kenichi Uhara, 10 years her senior, an advertising man recommended by a go-between. I guess you can call it a marriage broker. After a 4-day honeymoon, Kenichi vanishes. Teiko travels to the coastal and snowbound city of Kanazawa, where Kenichi was last seen, to investigate his disappearance. When Kenichi's brother comes to help her, he is murdered, poisoned in his hotel. Soon, Teiko discovers that her husband's disappearance is tied up with the so-called Pan girls, women who worked as prostitutes catering to American GIs after the war. Now, 10 years later, as the country is recovering, there are those who are willing to take extreme measures to hide their past. Just that premise is wonderful. But what's so interesting, in 1959, we have the wife taking charge of herself and going someplace and trying to find out what happened to her husband. Of course, she has to lean on the detective, who is also investigating this crime. I love this book, and it made me want to read more by the author, which I did. And my favorite book of his, which is very surprising, it has a gorgeous cover, which I am one day going to buy, because not only because of the cover, and I'm going to have a cover here. It's called no, it's not called that. Inspector Imanishi Investigates. I want to say one thing about this book. It is so much like an Agatha Christie book that I thought there would be many, many others following it, but it's actually the only one that has Inspector Imanishi. And he's a wonderful, wonderful character. He's into his bonsai trees and his haiku poetry, and he's just so interesting. So I became obsessed because of reading this book. Let me just tell you the premise. In the wee hours of a 1960s Tokyo morning, a dead body is found under the rails of a train, and the victim's face is so badly damaged that police have a hard time figuring out the victim's identity. Only 2 clues surface. An old man overheard talking in a distinctive accent to a young man, and the word kameda. Inspector Imanishi leaves his beloved bonsai and haiku and goes off to investigate and runs up against a blank wall. Months pass in fruitless questioning, in following up leads until the case is closed unsolved. And it goes on from there. And why is this book so special? And I had to think about that because I couldn't stop reading it. So it blends that meticulous police procedural with that rich commentary on post-war Japan that I'm so interested in. And it offers this, fascinating glimpse into the Japanese society that's transitioning between tradition and modernism. And so it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. So of course I became obsessed with this author, and read on my Kindle, and I'll show you a copy, A Quiet Place. I love this book so much. I hope you can really get a good feel of it. It's a beautiful cover. And like I said, it's also by Seicho Matsumoto. And so we have the premise: a government official, Suneo Asai, and his wife Eriko, no, it's Aiko. Eriko is somebody I know, dies of a heart attack in an unfamiliar Tokyo neighborhood, and Asai investigates the circumstances of her death, initially believing his wife led a double life. I don't want to go into anything because it's such a good book. So it says it highlights contradictions in Japanese society during its rapid economic growth. So now we're in the 70s, okay? So it's a kind of book that I like. It's like a psychological mystery, slow-paced, character-driven. What else can I say? My favorite kind of thing. I read another book called Pro Bono. I'll have the cover here. Did not like it as much, but some of you might. And it's the 2012 English translation of his Seicho Matsumoto's 1961 novel, Kiri no Hata. It's a detective and mystery novel about a poor young woman seeking help for her brother who is accused of a crime and says he's innocent. I didn't like this book only because I didn't like the characters in this book. So for me, I have to like the characters. but the plot itself was very, very interesting, and like I said, it's a good book. I don't think he can write a bad book. Okay, so then there's another book that I haven't read called, it's supposed to be his most famous book, called Tokyo Express. It was originally called Points and Lines. I'll try to have a copy here, and I'll just give you the premise. In a rocky cove in the Bay of Hagata, the bodies of young and beautiful couple are discovered. Stood in the coast's wind and cold, the police see nothing to investigate. The flush of the couple's cheeks speaks clearly of cyanide, of a lover's suicide, but in the eyes of two men, Toregai Jutaro, a senior detective, and Kiichi Mihara, a young gun from Tokyo, something is not quite right. Together they begin to pick up the knot of a unique and calculated crime. And this is supposed to be his masterpiece, so of course eventually I'm going to read it. Okay, so we're finished with that author for a while, and we're going to get into some books that I found on BookTube that I really enjoyed and didn't think I would. Now, this one I just finished reading recently. I took it out of the library, and it's The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. It's kind of covered with plastic, so you can't see it that well. It has some cherry blossom in the corner, but yeah, this is a very unusual book, and I heard that Yoko Ogawa writes a lot of horror books, but this is nothing horror about this book. So there was, I didn't think I would like this book because it talks about two things that I'm either very bad at, math, or I'm not that interested in, which is baseball. But yet I couldn't have been more wrong. So he is a brilliant math professor with a peculiar problem. Ever since a traumatic head injury, he has lived with only 80 minutes of short-term memory. She is an astute young housekeeper with a 10-year-old son who is hired to care for him. And every morning, as the professor and the housekeeper are introduced to each other anew, a strange and beautiful relationship blossoms between them. And he only has 80 minutes of memory. So every day, in the coming days, she has to pin a notice on her. You know me, I'm your housekeeper, and they start again anew. And that premise is very unusual, and it almost goes into a tiny bit of magical realism. Not really, but so they have this beautiful relationship that blossoms, and eventually he's a very kind man. He was a math professor. He's brilliant, and she has a son, and he is very worried that the son is alone too much. So he says to bring the son over, and the son and the professor also have a wonderful relationship. So the professor's mind is still alive with elegant equations from the past, and the numbers in all of their articulate order reveal a sheltering and poetic world to both the housekeeper and her young son. The professor is capable of discovering connections between the simplest of quantities, like the housekeeper's shoe size and the universe at large, drawing their lives even closer and more profoundly together, even as his memory is slipping away. This was a beautiful story, and baseball is another way that they become very, very close. Now, when I lived in the Kansai region, baseball is a very, very important part of Japanese culture. And they took American baseball and turned it very Japanese. And there are many, many books. I think one of them is something about wa, And I'll have that down below because I can't remember it right now. But when I was in the Kansai region, they have like teams and cheerleaders for each team. And my team, or my where I live team, was called the Hanshin Tigers. And whenever the Hanshin Tigers would go, their cheerleaders would go, Hanshin Tigers, go, go, go. So when I wanted to form a connection with one of my adult students, and I heard that they loved baseball, I would go, Hanshin Tigers? And I would say, go, go, go. And they would always, that would loosen them up and not be so afraid to speak in English. So I can't believe that for somebody, I am so bad in math, just let me tell you, that I would be so involved in this book that I would start studying a little bit of math. That's how powerful this book is. The only thing, if I have to say one negative about the thing, I wanted to know more about the housekeeper. But we don't really know more about her than her relationship with the professor. That's my only, I was going to say, well, what do you do when you go home? And do you have a boyfriend? Or do you have a hobby? It's all about her and the professor. And it says here, it's highly original, infinitely charming, and ever so touching. So, although it wasn't a 5-star read for me, I would call it a 4-star read. When I went to the library recently, I picked up another book that is not a horror book from her, and I am starting it and I'm really enjoying it. It's called Mina's Matchbox. It's more of a, I wouldn't call it a coming of age story exactly, because it's told 30 years after the young girl grows up. So it's almost like she's going back in time telling her story. And this is the author of the National Book Award finalist, The Memory Police, which is dystopian. It's almost, they said, like a 1984. So I might get to that one, but not to her horror books, because she does have short story horrors. So Mina's Matchbox was written in 2024. I haven't got too much into it, but it's translated by Stephen Snyder. And so I'll just give you a short synopsis of the book. In the spring of 1972, 12-year-old Tomoko leaves her mother behind in Tokyo and boards a train alone to Ashiya, a coastal town in Japan, to stay with her aunt's family. Tomoko's aunt is an enigma and an outlier in her working-class family, and her magnificent home and handsome foreign husband, the president of a soft drink company, are symbols of that status. The 17 rooms are filled with German-made furnishings, and I'll go etc., etc. But at the center of the family is Tomoko's cousin Mina, a precocious, asthmatic girl of 13 who draws Tomoko into an intoxicating world of secret crushes and elaborate storytelling. And also there's secrets of the family that are going to be revealed. So I only read the part where she's on the train going to her aunt's house. So I'm really looking forward to reading this, hopefully before I have to return it to the library. Some other books in my library that I haven't read yet, one that I tried is called The Inugami Curse by Seishi Yoko, a classic Japanese murder mystery. It's not a very good picture. I don't like that cover. But so I started, and I'll tell you why this is on my shelf. In 1940s Japan, the wealthy head of the Inugami clan dies, and his family eagerly awaits the reading of the will. But no sooner are its strange details revealed than a series of bizarre, gruesome murders begin. And I think that, so we have the legendary detective, Kosuke Kindaichi. And so we're going to find out about the curse against bloody revenge on the Inugamis. So this is a classic Japanese mystery. There's even a word for it in Japanese that they were saying that you know what you're going to get. It's like a typical, I think it might be a closed door mystery, but a closed room mystery, but I'm not sure. What got me from reading it, well, a lot of stuff, but what in the beginning, and people really like this, but this kind of puts me off a little bit. We have a character list and it's really big, long. Well, it's not really that long, actually. It's only one page. So I'm saying, oh, I got to remember everyone and see where I am. But I'm going to get to this eventually, as I'm going to get to a lot of others. Like another book that just came to my mind is the Makioka Sisters, which is more of a saga, which I'm not that much into sagas. It has to be something I'm really into. And I read a few pages of the Makioka Sisters, and I think I'm going to like that, and I'll have the information down below. And another book that I bought that I'm not sure I'm going to get to is The House of the Sleeping Beauties. And this is like a trio of stories by a very famous author, Yasunari Kawabata, translated by Edward Sider Sticker. So he's a Nobel Prize winning author, and it's noted for its combination of traditional Japanese aesthetic with modernist, often surreal trends. In these three tales, erotic fantasy is underlaid with longing and memories of past loves. And I think that this might be a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but it's on my shelf and I'm definitely going to read it. So tell me, what are your favorite Japanese translated books? Do you like Japanese books, translated fiction? Tell me about it in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I'm still healing from my whatever it was, insomnia. It's not gone 100%, but I am feeling much better, and I have a lot to tell you on that front soon. But please like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed my Japanese books and my little stories in between. So thank you, and as always, from this rainy, it always seems to be raining when I do a video. I don't know why, but I shall see you very soon. Aloha.